Om Adihi Sasam Yoga Namitta Hetu Paras Trikala Takala Pidristaha Tam Vishwarupam Bhavabhuta Midyam Devam Sachitastum Upasya Purvam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Meditate upon the Lord as thine own self, seated in your heart, who appears to you as the universe and who is the ultimate source of all living beings. Perceive that one as the primal cause of the relationship between consciousness and matter, and as the partless divine entity who transcends the three phases of time called past, present, and future. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Ajasaya Malamanta Anutana Malagantam Malavinasha Kosajam Pramada Rakato Malam. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Negligence is the rust of the watchman, leading to calamity. Sloth is the rust of all good and beautiful things. Non-recitation of scriptures is the rust of monastery. And lack of self-effort is the rust of households. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiyaresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadsha Akandarupa Stite Reva Moksho Brahma Vitye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings in the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So return to our format of Sunday afternoon live streaming class that we have foregone for the month of July. Of course, still always broadcasting our satsangs and what's called God blogs on Saturday in 2 one-hour events throughout the month of July. And always placing our mind in the Guru Dharma Sangha, triple gem of our tradition, which allows us for good, solid, substantial input from higher mind, called Dharma, Atma Gyan, Brahma Gyan, all coming from the new dispensation of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and the Neo Vedanta of Swami Vivekananda. That is, the Advaita Vedanta that's been given a freshening since Vivekananda came on the scenes and visited us in 1893 here in America, and again in the early 1900s, and also explaining to us what's happening to us in terms of this transformation on the physical, vital, and mental level of our being. Also intellectual and philosophical. There are many levels to our being. And there are many tools in which India has made possible for us throughout its long history of of Dharma and teachings, Guru, Dharma, and Sangha, or Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhava, or Shravana, Manana, Nididhasanam. Always these three triputtis, which need considering and constant practice. That's why I chanted Lord Buddha's quote from the Dhammapada just now about the rust of monasteries being caused by lack of recitation of scriptures, like some newfangled movements of Buddhism and so forth, just falling back on meditation only. But that steady recitation of scriptures is one of the old standbys and standards, part of the tradition that, say, Maezumi Roshi and other Roshis that came from Japan just over the last 2 generations stayed with. They didn't accent necessarily the meditation only, but they had us studying scriptures as if Zen wasn't some sort of simple, easy, floaty kind of tradition that we could adhere to and just meditate away our problems, but that we needed to go to the depths of that practice. 28 generations of it in India, in Buddhism, 22 generations of it in China and Japan, and now 2 generations of it in America, starting with, at least if you look at Soto Zen, 2 generations, meaning Maezumi Roshi's transmission, handing it over to Bernie Glassman, and Bernie Glassman giving ordination, along with a Japanese woman, Roshi, to Lex Hixon, our founder, so that Zen could live on in America. And particularly that part of the tradition that relies very heavily on getting rid of the rust that can accumulate over both the monastic life and householder life. Lack of self-effort is the rust of households, he said. This is 2,500 years ago. He said this to the people of India. And since then, some 52, now 53 generations have come forward, India's teachings, right on through China, Tibet, Burma, and Ceylon and other countries. Finally into Japan, well, maybe about 650 AD, current era. And there, the Chan Buddhism path and everything developing, and beings beginning to bring it over to another Oriental country called Japan. So we'll look at that a little bit today, because today you're going to have to take up a sacred Sunday. Usually the West is used to get out the beer, get out the fast food, turn on the Sunday football game, and let's see who wins. So now we're going to ask you to get out the organic green juice, or at least some non-alcoholic beer, and sit in front of your computer screen and watch a doubleheader. This doubleheader is going to pit the Zen Buddhist ox herders against the Advaita Vedanta lion tamers, and let's see who wins. If winning is even the point here, because when you get to religion and high-minded philosophy, you find out how many complements there are between the 2 traditions. And that's what we want to do, since, ironically, if it is ironic, the first Roshi that came from Japan came to the Parliament of Religions in 1893 to bring Zen from Japan. And that was where Swami Vivekananda landed, why he was coming from India. So this movement of Zen had come all the way around, like both hands across the waters, actually across the world, and it reached around and then descended back into Chicago. Both Zen and Advaita Vedanta were there represented in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions. A little known fact, because most of us know that Swami Vivekananda was there and took everyone by surprise with the ancient sannyasin tradition that he called it. I belong to the most ancient order of monks in existence, he said at his inauguration address at the Parliament of Religions. So he was telling them about the sannyasin, later what he called, when he told Nikola Tesla when he met him, I know how to get more juice out of my orange. So he was asking Westerners who had intellectual scientific knowledge on the apara vidya level, lower knowledge you call it in India, to sit up and listen to the para-vid. We want para-vid, not COVID, as we've been saying humorously lately. That builds up the immune system in the mind, because that's the best immune system to have. The body will follow the mind because mind gives birth to bodies. In fact, according to both Advaita and Zen, both the ox herders and the lion tamers, that everything has come out of the mind. And Tibetan Buddhism calls that Mahamudra teaching. That's the Great Seal. Everything is understood by this idea that everything originates from mind. So hopefully our mind is pure mind. And that's Buddha mind, Lord Buddha said. Sri Ramakrishna, 2,000 years later or more, said, pure mind is Brahman. So we're to think of enlightenment, or lack thereof, as being a condition of mind or not. No mind would be this samadhi in Vedanta, would be satori in Zen, would be a sampragyata in yoga, and would be Kaivalya in Samkhya Yoga of Lord Kapila. So we know that each of these traditions, whether all Indian-based, has a particular penchant on bringing forth this hidden essence that you're looking for. And people go looking for it as if they lost an ox, you see. But the first thing you'll hear at the first stage of 10 stages of ox herding is that the ox was never lost. You went out your hut one day and there's a clump of bushes there and it was probably standing behind there. And so you say, oh, I lost my ox. You have to go looking for it. So then 9 stages later, you realize it was always present. It had just been obscured. That's Advaita Vedanta teaching. That obscuration is called false superimposition, or in Sanskrit, vivarta, or adhyasa. So things are not the way they appear, is the yogi's way of putting that. So you're going to have to see through the covering power of Maya. Covering power can be so deep and so inscrutable that it's very difficult to see through objects to what underlies the object, which I just chanted, Brahman, time, space, living beings, the world. World is objects. That's called enlightenment, when you realize that all that is Brahman. But until you can see through the appearance of name and form in time and space, and the karma that comes off of that process, the mind creates something, acts in it, thinks in it, acts in it, and gets karma back, and it's shocked by these sour fruits that come out of life in the world. It's shocked, Ramprasad sings in one of his beautiful songs. And sweet fruits come out too, which make it all the harder, all the more confusing. Well, wait a minute, everything was fine yesterday. Why isn't it good today? And why do good things happen to bad people, but why do bad things happen to good people too? Or maybe it's that in Zen and in Advaita Vedanta, things don't happen at all, and that people are nothing else but the Atman. And that's just your outer expression, and you haven't seen through it yet. You haven't seen how to worship God in human form, which was the last words of my dream 2 nights ago when I woke up for Saturday morning meditation. A man was there in my dream telling 4 of us that they need to realize God in human form. The last words that echoed as I came out of dream for my 5:30 a.m. meditation Saturday morning. So it's as if it was a message for the Bur Loka, this world, physical world. There's other lokas inside. Kings of heaven are within you, and so forth. My father's house has many mansions in it. There's a huge house with many mansions and many chambers inside those mansions. These could be people, or they could be lokas, or both. And it's all in the great mind. The whole thing's contained in the great mind of God, the Mahat, they call that. So you're making contact with Mahat in deep sleep, and you're making contact with the lokas in dream, and you're coming back to the Bur Loka in waking. as Advaita Vedanta tells you. And that same three-world series is in Zen. It's three worlds, one mind, they call it in Japanese. Three worlds, one mind. So you can see how 58, 53 generations, how many other generations away from the original source of the teachings, like with Marpa in Tibet, when he brought it over the Himalayas to Tibet from India, from Naropa and Tilopa, that was already a very well matured teaching in India that had been accepted for how many more generations prior to that, like the 24 Tirthankaras of Jainism that were all nonviolent, leading up to Mahavir, the 24th, and how Buddhism also played off of that nonviolent theme. So deep and so ancient that it's founded movements here in the West, recent movements on nonviolence, like Gandhi and so forth. So we always have to look to that deep source. Drink from the source is a beautiful, from the mountain stream is a beautiful book on Milarepa's songs. He's talking about from the Tibetan Buddhist side of the Great Seal, of the Mahamudra, how this ox was never lost in the first place, according to the Zen Roshis. You just went out one day and didn't see it. It's like having a lifetime where it got obscured by circumstances, karmas, samskaras, your ancestors, your family, the nation, the condition of time at that particular cycle was just to obscure things more readily than not, and thicker than usual. Like back in 2 or 3 yugas ago, everyone was supposed to be in full knowledge of the ownership of their ox. That was like the most precious thing. Your Atman. You see, Bussho in Zen, Atman in Advaita Vedanta. Everyone had full knowledge of that. Those were brightly shining yugas of light. Satya Yuga, it's named after Sat, truth. Everyone knew the truth. Next yuga passes, which is quite a few 100,000 years in the Indian reading of time. And then, 1/3 of my knowledge about my ox, or my Atman, my ox Atman, went away, you see. And there's some darkness there, you see. I better concentrate on what I know here, because I'm losing it. And then you lose 2/3 of it in the next yuga, and then the Kali Yuga comes, which is now you are here on the star map of time. Then nobody knows a thing about it. What are you talking about, oxes? You see. I don't even know what they are. So that person, and this is all a lead up, here's the chart, and it's based on our founder, Lex Hickson's book, Coming Home, his chapter in that book about Zen ox herding. Pulled it out of that, a lot of it, and with a few traditional additions from the Japanese Roshis and China too. But we're not going to go there right away. I'm just warming you up to that. Nor are we going to go to exactly how the Advaita Vedanta lion tamers deal with the same problems of false superimposition or loss of memory, because they all put it in those terms. It's just loss of memory of who you are. You can't actually lose your true nature. So it's just getting obscured and you're forgetting it. So the whole trick would be, as it were, to strip away coverings that you yourself have put in front of it. You meaning not only you, but your ancestors, as Lord Buddha would teach. Stripping away coverings until you finally see it. And you're sitting in Zazen in a Zen monastery one day, that's what you're waiting for. Those coverings are going to fall away at a certain point in time. Like Sri Ramakrishna talked about the clock with many gears. They set up in Calcutta one day for a time, and then it was all plexiglass or clear glass or whatever. And so you could see through the clock, you'd see all the gears working. It was a huge thing, evidently. But the most unique thing about it was that for just one day out of those years, or a few minutes out of every year, you could the gears would line up in such a way that you could see your friend at the other side of the clock, see, waving at you. The rest of the time you couldn't see anything. The gears were in the way. So the whole import of that to Sri Ramakrishna, good God blog again, would be that, the karma gears, the samskara gears, the ancestor gears, your own karma gears are turning. And if you're watching in meditation very closely, like you would be doing in Zazen, which we used to do right across the channel there on Oahu at the Diamond Zendo with Aitken Roshi, who is also a student, I think, of Mayazumi Roshi. We used to sit with him at the Diamond Zendo, Lex Hickson, our founder, and myself, and my wife. And we would all sit there and wait for those gears to align on any given day. And so we could see through the appearance of Maya, if you want to put it Vedantically, or have that simply natural moment of Zen, Satori, where everything, all the rising and falling of phenomena just all of a sudden ceases like a breath does in deep sleep, and you're having your first insight that the Bodhisattva looks for in meditation, that makes him a Buddha, makes her a Buddha, and that the Advaita Vedanta is also looking for, called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where imaginings in space and time go away. Nirvikalpa, imaginations, kalpanika, in time, go away. Your dreams stop. Dreams, whether they're in waking or dreaming state, it's more like deep sleep, where those things are not in the way anymore, but still there's a cloud of nescience in front of you that doesn't allow you to remember the light that you saw in deep sleep when you wake up. Yet you got reflection from it. Deep sleep, even for 20 minutes, like an afternoon nap, is known for bringing you peace and relief. And if you lose that, or you don't get good deep sleep at night, then you turn into a nervous wreck. The first soul that we heard use that term was back about 600 AD. Gaudapada used it in his Karaka on the Mandukya Upanishad. They are called nervous wrecks. He's talking about people who lost the ox or forgot the ox completely. It's hiding in plain sight in their front yard. They've just lost the ability to see it and forgotten it completely. So the whole thing is based on Vismriti, which we had a seminar on recently. It's just the loss of remembrance of who you are. The more we can accent that through different avenues or directions, the more people will start to make an effort, because lack of self-effort is the rest of households. So they'll be coming aware of how important it is for them to wake up in the waking state. Awake, awake, you must, one song says in India. You've been sleeping for ages, or for lifetimes. And then they'll teach your children how to awaken. The children will get it at an early age. Even nowadays you can put a child, if you're serious about it, into meditation and watch them just kind of disappear back to the mind before it got incepted, the body before it got conceived, and so forth. So that's still in memory, in the child's subconscious mind, the memory of just having been formless a few months ago or a few years ago, whatever the case may be. And that's why there's such a light coming off of some young souls. And you can bring it out and complement it, intensify it. So, we have pictures at our home here 30 miles away of 4-year-old Tibetan boys sitting in meditation with robes on. And have met people who were raised in ashrams in India, who are now monks, or maybe forest dwellers or householders and yogis that had that influence. We're just talking about one of them today, who was raised in Sri Aurobindo ashram from a very young age. So that these people are there on the scene to tell us that I got an early start on remembrance of who I am. And look how my life is radiating. And why is your life so stressful and heavy? and so many impediments in the way. Did you realize that you're putting those in the way yourself? And when you don't teach your children this Dharma, you're just putting another impediment in front of yourself. And with the ancestors, the karma of the ancestors. So all of this comes down to a sort of an explanation of this first level of ox herding, which you could say in India would be like having your first conscious remembrance of having lived before. They call that deja vu in the West, I know, back since the 60s and so forth, which is kind of just the very covering, superficial covering over the whole rebirth teaching, karma teaching and so forth. But nevertheless, it's this inkling all of a sudden you get, probably because either the gears lined up for you karmically, or you actually met somebody who had helped you to practice and start meditating, like I did with Lex Hickson, our founder. Some of my first formal meditations were with him when I was in my early 20s. So you have this avenue that's been closed to you, a nadi, an inner nerve, an inner passageway, like the Sushumna and the Ida and the Pingala coming up in Kundalini Yoga, that is blocked by forgetfulness and darkness and tamas and habit and so forth. And you just raise a wind. That's out of the Tibetan Buddhist teaching. You raise a wind to blow. First it's the wind of earth, then it's the wind of water, then it's the wind of fire, then it's the wind of ether, and so forth. These are actually, you imagine these things as winds, vayu, prana, blowing through you, to blow away these clouds, because really they're just cloud-like. They're not like solid blockages, like trying to drill through solid stone or something. But it's just ignorance without any substance in it. Like clouds can be dispersed by a wind up high. So this is how you approach, and it's particularly effectively explained through Zen Buddhism, is that they make it more of a simple process. So I'll show you, when we come back to this chart, I'll show you the way Zen would approach it in 10 steps, in conjunction with how Advaita Vedanta would approach it in 9 steps. And you can see how one being very simple and kind of natural, just using a simple story of finding your ox and ox herding, learning the art of it. The other being a bit more complex and a bit more personal and a bit more associated with the troubled mind that needs to do some negation before it can get a good start into these inner nadis. It's become rusty, it's become complacent. The willpower is gone, and attachment to pleasures is there instead. And that's causing pain-bearing problems in your mind, the kind of which people are complaining about more and more in this day and age. Peace of mind is gone. All these things, there's a reason for that that's actually quite simple. And that kind of sincere yearning that Sri Ramakrishna talked about, that you want to drum up, cry a few tears for God because you're crying a jug of tears for the world. The world's not really real, so let's give that up for a while. Empty the jug and try just to cry one sincere tear for the Lord and Mother of the universe, and get someone powerful on your side. You need a friend in high places, see. So I think before we would start into, that's an usual kind of introduction to this double header of the ox herders against the lion tamers, and we'll see how they match up, because any good sports program shows you the matchups in the different teams with the quarterbacks and the linebackers and the tight ends and so forth, so that you know more about your field. See, but this field is not a football field, and it consists more of principles than personalities, as Vivekananda said. It's a very nice saying, is that we study principles and not so much the personalities. Holy Mother used to say that. She said, Forget your personality. Remember your true self. So she was always taking the impetus that you might have built up around inflating the ego away so that it would always deflate like it does at night in deep sleep. It goes away completely. But that inflating tendency is remembered when you wake up. So you want to instead remember the deflating tendency and how that works in your waking state. To humble yourself, to learn something new. It's actually nothing, there's nothing new under the sun, as Ecclesiastes was to say, but basically learn something eternal would be a good way of putting new, or at least ancient, so that you're looking back again to that time when Bussho, when Atman was your most precious possession and you lived in it, in bliss, in love, in nondual wisdom. And these are words that people can't relate to now because they haven't tasted it yet. Some people have never tasted milk. Some people have heard of milk but never tasted it. Some people have tasted it, and some people own a dairy. And so these souls who own a dairy are passing milk out to others if they will take it. These are the beings that are illumined from lifetime to lifetime. And they're known by names such as Tulkus, Rinpoches, Roshis, Swamis, Avaduttas, and so forth. Saints and seers. And we turn to them for these teachings. And a good place to get into these teachings is right there at what we call the Dharma, because as it turns out, the virtue-vice thing is not working very well. Morality, immorality. These lower dualities, as Krishna explains in the Gita, are causing the mind to ping-pong back and forth. You know how the head works that way? So if you look at a sports match like we're talking today, you see the audience there, you look at their heads. So here's what the head looks like in a tennis match. Here's what it looks like in a ping pong match. Here's what it looks like in a professional ping pong match. Here's what it looks like in a golf match. But here's what it looks like in philosophy. As you listen to the sound of Om and see the light behind everything. So it's important to give the head some teaching and a position. It's called an asana. So this asana is what you want, you see. And until you get this asana is what you're going to want, you see. You've got to see to believe. And in India, hearing is more important than seeing, because hearing connects to ether, whereas seeing only connects to fire. If you're connecting in yoga the elements to the senses, right? That would, smelling to earth, tasting to water, sight to fire. This is Yoga 101, and it's beyond hatha for sure already. So, you're entertaining these teachings to make connections back between your senses and the elements so that you can understand what objects are and then understand that they're empty if you go to the shunyata teaching of Buddhism. And once you understand they're empty, you lose your attachment to them, see. And then you can enjoy them or not, it doesn't matter. There's no karma involved in it anymore. There's just rising and falling, rising and falling. So to learn something then is very important. So let's learn something about ox herders and lion tamers. Because our founder, Lex Sixon, was practicing joint citizenship in different religious traditions of the world. I heard him say that once. Joint citizenship in different religious traditions of the world. He became a Sufi sheikh toward the end of his practice. And then he got this, the very end of his practice was Zen, when he got this ordination, and they named him Jikai. It means oceanic compassion in Japanese, Jikai. So that was one of the names that he earned toward the end of his life. So because of that, I've put my own mind, and a couple times I've even taught a few Zen retreats and held Zazen and put on the right colors. And we've gone deep into Zen Buddhism, using Coming Home, using Living Buddha Zen, and using the Mother of the Buddhas. Those are the three books like Sixon wrote for us in his Buddhist phase. And so we have there a teacher that is showing us not only these beautiful teachings in Buddhism and how many generations it took for them to come from from India through these countries to Japan, but we also had it done in such a way that we knew that he was heralding this great realization of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, which was his main path. Many times I asked him over the period he was practicing these different religious traditions, who's your daddy, kind of thing, or in this case, who's your mommy? And he said, Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Sharda. That's my main deity. That's how I started off with, and that's what those were his ideals through his whole lifetime. He said that's what made me able to do these other paths, was the Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. Because Swami Nikhilananda in New York was the one who taught him this, and he did his dissertation in college on Gaudapada's Karika, which sometimes we take up in retreat. So these are important historical facts on a spiritual level, but I think if we're going to learn something, and it's going to make more sense, because I've often said you could take a vacation to a foreign country, like Spain, say, because that was really good for Sufism. Spain is one of the great doorways of Sufism into the West. So if I go to Spain, then I have a good time, but if I don't know Spanish, then I'm really missing a lot. It's the same with Sanskrit, and in this case Japanese too, or Sanskrit and Chinese, or Sanskrit and Pali, the derivative that I just chanted in when I chanted Lord Buddha's Rust of Monastery sloka. So to know both sides of these different languages, it goes beyond just mere linguistics and interest in that, but you're looking for the meaning in words, and you're looking for a deeper meaning in words, just like you'd look for a deeper meaning in an object if you're a yogi, so you could see beyond the object. You're looking for a deeper meaning in the word for the object, so you could see beyond just the sound. And you'd know where the sound originates from. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. There you're talking about some profound origin to the Word. Or some of the songs that we sing sometimes in India. Vani Saraswati Vakdevi Bhagavati Parvati Mampahi Vinapani Hamsavahini Vedanta Rupini Palayamam Vani Saraswati Vakdevi Bhagavati Parvati Mampahi. So whether you put it in terms of a scripture or you put it in terms of a song, a devotional wisdom song, we call that, then you've got this profound entranceway again, doorway, nadi, right into the meaning of the word and the one who utters it. In this case, Saraswati, the goddess of arts and learning. So when you learn something about a word, you could learn it just for the basic, making a living kind of way. Let's learn the alphabet, let's raise our children, that's all good. What grade did you get in English in high school, and so forth and so on. And now you can write a book because you did that, you see. But when you enter spiritual life and graft that with that kind of learning, that is, the higher knowledge is realized as being the ultimate goal, paragatam, Buddha said, and this lower knowledge is supposed to be subsidiary to it and help make a connection to it. So it's not like I just give up the lower knowledge and all of a sudden I go transcendental on the thing and I can meditate myself into a non-dual position. These words are going to be very important for you to go by stages called avastas to realize the mother of the word, because she's in a form, a very subtle form. And so it's just like, again, looking at objects and finding atoms and molecules and quarks and neutrons and protons, primary subatomic particles. But at that time you better make a conclusion, the object's empty, like they did. And make it on a spiritual, intellectual, psychological, philosophical, spiritual level. Fill in everything. Just leave it in the hands of body, mind, and ego, and intellect. But take it on to the higher levels, the principle beyond the personality. That's why they want you to, efface the self and look for the higher self, if you want to put it that way. And, self isn't a word that you'd want to use around Buddhists so easily without some sort of explanation. They'll turn to you like Robert Thurman turned to me one day and said, well, sounds like the Atman to me. But I had to say that from my understanding that the Atman is ahamkara to us. And the Atman is Bussho to Zen, or Buddha nature, or Vivekananda said Buddha called it pragya param, supreme intelligence, which proved that he did believe in a God, as it were. It's just those words and those terms you don't want to use. You'd be better off using, okay, no God, I agree with you, see. Because you see the way the word God has become loaded, weighed down with baggage, and also conceptually even it's not a very good word to use. So, you would be going from word to word and extracting out an essence from words, just like scientists did from objects again. It's no different really, it's just on a different level. I think people would lose their aversion or their disinterest, depending on what's there in the mind of today's materialistic-oriented societies. They would lose more of their aversion or their tamas, again, like you said, their complacency, if they knew that the process of looking into words was just as deep as looking into objects, that there were levels to that, and that there was a conclusion to make from it. So here's some conclusions that we can make. Zen Buddhism, Buddha nature is called Bussho there. So there's really great teachings on Bussho that I think probably many Buddhists don't know about, that were given through the generations. Across the board you've got what we call Atman, right? Indivisible self. We would use the word self without any problem because we can compare it to the lower self and the higher self. It's that easy to us. Atman, or ahamkara, the empty ego which gets born and dies, and the Atman which doesn't ever get born or die. That's just the all-pervasiveness of Bussho. Next, I'm going through these quick, so hang on to your hats or your dhotis or your saris or whatever you're wearing, your Western clothes, as we do this. Dayanjin, the great peace of mind. Well, that would of course be shanti, shanti, shanti to us. We want to bring this peace to all three worlds. Daigadatsu, the great liberation. Call it nirvana if you want. That's like our moksha, eternal freedom. It's not a freedom that's to be gained, or that you get through evolution or through time. It's the ox already in your yard, but you can't see it. That's moksha. You better cut that bush, away, or look behind it. Look behind the appearance and say, oh, I see, yeah, I remember now. My ox is still in here. I don't have to go out in the jungle and go through 7 or 8 stages to try and find it again and tame it. So forth. I am that. Hanya is inner wisdom, or pragya in Zen. Jnanam would be that word for us. Kenshushi, the uniqueness of all things because of their empty nature, called shunyata. Well, there easily, from the Yoga Darshana, we pick out all subjects utilized for meditation. I'm sorry, all objects utilized temporarily for subjects in meditation. That's called an alambana, when you take something and meditate on it. Like wisdom, words, you're meditating on those. Or the mahat I said earlier. I'm going to take up the great mind of God today. See? Can it really be harmful? Isn't it going to be a good thing even if you don't succeed? To understand the way the Lord views things? I mean, you're reading a powerful scripture, you're actually getting the mind of Sri Krishna in the Gita. You can see how vast that is, even just on a few hours on the battlefield, where he gave it to Arjuna. So this is something that you take up as a subject, an object and a subject, the relationship between them. Well, there's Banpo Zen, practice of Zen for health only, and for longevity. Of course, we'd call that Hatha. Banpo Zen is one of 5 or 6 different kinds of Zen. I actually have a chart on that I can show you, which are not authentic Zen. Well, all the Roshi say, you don't want that, you don't want that. That's wild fox Zen, you see. That's Banpo Zen, and so forth. Those are not real Zen. Here's the real Zen. So this to us would be all these spurious yogas that are being, produced by people today, like the different kinds of Kriya yogas. You just go back to Patanjali; he'll tell you what Kriya yoga is. It's right there in the scriptures, but they won't follow the father of yoga, but they'll create some different yogas of their own, and you can get obsessed with them. This is where the tradition of Zen and Vedanta comes through to save the seeker, instead of lose them in the forest. That's a stage of ox herding. You forgot your Atman, you went out, and somewhere in there you lost it in the forest. The saving grace after losing it was that it's so big that if you just sit and watch the forest a while, you'll see something move. You see, oh, there it is. Now let's see, how do I get a noose around it? How do I convince it to come home with me? This is the way the Roshis would explain it to you in your traditional classes on ox herding, so that you get the idea. But they would first, like Sri Ramakrishna told Swami Vivekananda, the man in the fish market cuts off the head and the tail, gives you the body. That's a true Dharma teacher. You see. They'll cut off the head and the tail, give you the meat of the teachings, so that you can roll them over in your mind. But you have to follow through with that too. And that's these kinds of Zen that people take on that are, like for instance, for health and longevity. I think I'll practice religion so that I can live a long time. See? Was that ever on the minds of the seers, that they wanted to live a long time? Unless they took it up as an alamban and said, I need this time, so I'll master it. It was up to them. But health, who can have great health all the time? The people who get sick the least are these yogis, who have these mental stances, asanas in their mind, that are inviolable. They won't let in Maya. You are never in Maya. Maya is in you. So be rid of it, Vivekananda said. We were talking about that today in our ride over. That the mind is everything in that way too. The mind can either show you the nondual Brahman that's behind everything, or it can show you Maya, if that's the way it's tuned. See, like Sri Ramakrishna said once, 2 men went into the temple at Jagannath. One of them saw the Lord. The other saw a bunch of trash in his mind. So, they went in with different states of mind, that's all. And different gunas and different abilities. The one went in with the right orientation, there's the Lord in form. The other went in dragging a bunch of stuff out of the world with him. So he wasn't going to see the Lord in the image. Susoku kan, watching the breath in 4 ways. And so you know that Buddhism has that early teaching of watching the breath. That's a good thing. I think it can go deeper. In yoga it does go deeper because you connect the breath with the mantras of Om and with other triputis. We call that pranayama, whatever the case. Breathing exercise to purify the nadis. And so, am I doing it for health or longevity? What if I just purify the nadis instead, and health then comes to me naturally? I don't have to waste time. Let's just get to the source of the blockage. If my breathing can all of a sudden cause my mind to think higher thoughts, then why am I not practicing that every morning? Or when I'm feeling down, you see? Why can't I just change the gunas with my breath? Take a sleepy meditation, just breathe a little bit for a minute or two. Oh, that's better. It's like sending up a kite to find the wind. So there's a lot of simple solutions. These don't have to be really deep philosophical axioms. Leave that for later, when you're battling, to get beyond form to formlessness, or to transcend rebirth. That's where philosophy that you've learned will hold you in good stead, and maybe bring back into a next lifetime what a bodhisattva does, or what a jivan mukta does, an ishvara koti, an avatar. These beings are fully mastered in that way. Moving through this, fukyo nikyo, spontaneous doing by not doing. Does it sound familiar? Those of you who have read Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna's teachings, or the Ramayana, Sri Ram's teachings on karma and so forth. Yeah, so we would call that niskama karma. Selfless action out of oneness. It's those who know that action is in inaction, and inaction is inaction, they know the truth. Arjuna is probably going, well, I don't really understand that yet. I'm still wondering if I'm going to pick up that bow and arrows or not. You're talking to me about this kama karma. But the whole thing is, on the battlefield, is fraught with that possibility. He could actually go, because he has to kill an enemy, he has to kill relatives, he has to kill relatives he likes. It's just that simple for him. But Sri Krishna is telling him, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Pick up your bow and arrows, put an arrow through the chink in the armor of one of those, and do it all without revenge, without hate, without money making, without the idea of violence, knowing that everything is birthless and deathless. Here, do that action this way. And watch the best happen for everyone, even the one you killed. So he says later, those who think they're being killed and those who are killing, they know not. And of course, there is a higher philosophical precept for you to think about and work into your life. Yep, those poor piggies out there, tearing up our lawns here in Hawaii. People are getting their guns out now. You see, whereas before they didn't want to kill the creatures, especially the little ones. They're so cute, right? But it's time for that to stop because they're overrunning everything and tearing up everything. So there you have it, what to do in Maya and how to do it. If to do it or not to do it. So then there's next Bussho. What's unborn, what's inactive, and what's timeless? Well, it sounds like a good time to bring in the principle of ajativada to me in Advaita Vedanta, the path of those who are free of birth and death. Ajati. Jati is birth and can also mean caste and so forth. I'm not entering into any of that. I'm ajati. I follow the path of ajativada. My path, vada, is those who know that even when they're born, they're not born because they're not the body. That the mind predicted everything here, you see, including my bodies. And it just stays in one place as the bodies come and go. It's inactive. I could sing you verses about that. In fact, why don't I, since we want to offset some of these teachings with their deeper meaning. Shouldn't be too hard, because I've taken all of the Avatuta's teachings out of the Avatutta Gita and put one word English words with them. There it is. This one says inactive. So I'll sing you verse 26. Because we just said that's that acting without acting, right? And the art of that. Nishkarma karma pramam satatam karomi nisanga sangarahitam paramam vinodam nirdeha deha rahitam satatam vinodam gyanamritam samarasam Gaganopamoham Maya prapancha rachana Nachame vikara Kautilya damba rachanam Nachame vikara Satya nirteti rachana Nachame vikaro Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. He sings in Sanskrit and says to us, I, the Avatut, am ever free of action, although I engage in the highest acts free of karma. I enjoy the non-attachment in a state of seeming attachment. Dwelling in the body, I enjoy unimaginable joy of bodilessness. Therefore, I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. This labyrinth of false love, they call Maya, causes no stain. It has no effect on me. Within its flexuous modes of knowledge, like higher, lower, relative, absolute, no change comes over me as a result. For I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. And he goes on like that for 40 verses. You can look into that great nondual scripture of the Advaita Vedanta school called Avatutta Gita and look for those 40 verses in one of the chapters. So, to illustrate musically through what we call a stotram, a non-dual chant, hardly call it a song, but it does have lyrics, and there's very few of them really. Like I listed them down here: Nirvana Shatkam, Gyanamritam Stotram, Hastamalaka Stotram, and so forth. You have very few of them compared to the numerous amounts of devotional songs that Indians put out about Ishtams, about gods, goddesses, and so forth. These stotrams are very rare, very beautiful, and are written by these beings who have seen through all the appearances and, without a doubt, seen the light of Brahman behind them all. The only thing that exists, they say. That's really existence right there. Everything else is a false superposition, an illusion. If you want to be kind to it, it's an expression. If you want to be careful, it's a reflection. You see. But it's also pain-bearing, you see, like Patanjali said. So it's with qualities, saguna. It's with seeds, sabijam. So, great teachings about it from these non-dual stotrams. What else is here for us? Hakushi. The mind free of ideas, images, and concepts. We're just talking about that. We call that chit shuddhi, the pure mind, free of thoughts. It's qualified for samadhi if you can get pure mind, because you have purity of food you need, and you have purity of location, and you need purity of atmosphere, you need purity of actions, and then you get to this purity of thought. If you could start with that, that's like having the oxen in view in your yard every day. They come to the earth with minds like that. That's why they're so great, and we remember them so much. That's what you want to start with. But if that's not the case, and you have to go by stages, ox-herding stages, which we'll see either soon or after the second half, then so be it. Then that gets rid of the rust. What we cannot allow is the rust to remain, because it's corrosive and it eats through the metal. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, and I just put it up on our website, ASR, if you want to look it up there and join us in these great teachings. He said the needle, in the climate of Calcutta, you see, where it's so wet, it turns rusty, so you can't even get it through the cloth anymore. So what do you do with a needle that has rust on it? Well, you get down there with some elbow grease and some salt water, and you start scrubbing. It shines again. This is like your devotion, your knowledge and your devotion. You want to make sure that that needle will penetrate through anything to get to remembrance of your true nature, Bussho, Atman. So, is it just about objects like a needle, or can that convey to us something deeper? Yes, he means the needle of the mind needs to be polished with the salt solution too. That salt solution is devotion, because devotion to the Lord causes you to cry tears. And even people in deep meditation, you see tears coming out of their eyes. So they must be experiencing something very beautiful. Could even be form sometimes, or it can be on the cusp of form, between form and formlessness, or it can be the actual formlessness itself if you have all of a sudden satori in Zen. You see, all of a sudden, I died on my cushion, they say. My zafu. Have you died on your zafu yet? They'll ask you if you go into zazen with them. So they want to know if your personality gave up finally. It's bid for supremacy, and it just popped. So you're going to need a needle for that, you see, to get in to pop that ego, because it's buried deep in many people. So this is why we want to have these minds that are able to be free of ideas, thoughts, chit shuddhi, purity, and concepts too. I mean, those are different levels of things. Ideas can come and go, but concepts, those people grab onto those for centuries and hold them. Like what the old math was compared to the new math, or what the old physics was compared to the quantum physics. They'll hold on to that for centuries, when both the new math and the old math are beside the point. Your true nature is the only math for you. And Vedanta will become your only science when you know it. Zen will become your only practice when you understand it. So this is why I'm doing this. You see, it's cross between related cultures. Advaita Vedanta stayed in India for so long. We now call it Neo-Vedanta, which means Vivekananda brought it with a freshening, you see, a fresh face on it. He brought the old Advaita Vedanta forward. Probably the last beings to do that really effectively were Gaudapada and Shankara around 700 AD. Now he's brought this new face of Advaita Vedanta, you see. And that's why he could come to the Parliament of Religions across the waters and share it with the Americans and the British, who had just been in his country making a mess of things. Oh, you did that to me, I'll turn the other cheek. Here, look at this. Maybe you won't be so violent anymore. so dominating. Meanwhile, these Roshis were coming, you see, on the other side from Japan to Chicago to show up there and tell people about Zen. It was a beautiful thing that's happened right under people's noses. And here, 100 or more years later, many of us still aren't aware of what happened and how important that happening is. Get together, practice together, start a journal. I'm quoting from Vivekananda back in 1902. If you could start a journal and get a group of people together, that will be a good thing for the Vedanta here. When we were looking for our East Coast Center, SRV Center back there, 100 acres came up because somebody read something that Vivekananda had said earlier in his writings. There's land for sale here. He was talking about New York area. So they all of a sudden read that in, some 40 years ago or so, and started looking. Sure enough, there was 100 acres there for sale. It already had an Indian temple on it. The people before had vacated it. And so SRV bought the whole thing, temple and all. It's a part of our history, you see, that of Vedanta that's going on. There's Hasan. That's another Mayoi, it's called. Mayoi means illusory practices. These aren't doing you any good. Hasan means interrupted practice because you're getting spiritual experience. That's how careful Zen is with it. And we would have that as be unmadana, attachment to subtle bliss. You're getting experiences, and all of a sudden you stop your practice the next day and start talking to everyone about what a great experience I had. Or worse, you start teaching. See, just because you had one little inkling. So there are words for it in Japanese. I don't know if it's coming up, but you do not celebrate spiritual experiences more than a moment. You just go to your Roshi and say, well, this is what happened to you. You say, good, go forward. And don't cling to it like the man, coming out of the woods who's been lost, wet, hungry. He sees a sign that says civilization that way, and he clings to the sign and never goes forward to the civilization, you see. So that's a tendency in people. That's like what they're calling here, that kind of Zen. Hasan. Then there's Inga, the fruits of cause and effect. Well, that's not a hard one for any of us to find in Vedanta. It's just karma, basically. Then there's Ishi Injo. This is where this really gets good and why I did it, because when I studied Zen and I was an Advaita Vedantist and yogi practitioner, then I started thinking, oh wow, look at the similarities there. The Zen Roshis are aware that you should take one teacher. One taste bowl, they call that. Because in Japan you eat a bowl, right? One taste, you don't go and borrow from other bowls, you see. You just have this as yours, you see. So they know that it doesn't matter if the Roshi down the street is a better teacher than the one you have. This is a teacher you have, and you've got him for a reason, or her. But, because there's now female Roshis, which it hasn't been for a long time. I mean, the thing about Zen with Roshis is that there were so many different kinds of teachers along that 28 generations and 22 generations. I mean, one was a leper, one Zen Roshi. Another had a wife and a child. One, was a worker in the marketplace. So you don't have to be a monk, a Swami kind of thing in India, to be an enlightened Zen Roshi. There's lists of dozens and dozens of lineage holders, they call them, that were from different walks of life. And the only thing that was missing for a long time was the women. And now that's changing. Thank God. Ishin Denshin. Well, did I give you the, oh yes, so Ishi Injo, training under one preceptor, we would call that Ishtanishta, right? Devotion to one ideal, one teacher you take. Maybe you can get more teachers later, like our founder did. But he took that one teacher, Swami Nirvikalpa, till he passed. And then, he spread out and started looking into other traditions with Advaita Vedanta as his foundation. Then you've got something similar here, Ishin Denshin, transmission from Roshi to disciple, and that would be the Guru Parampara that you hear about. Succession of a wisdom lineage, passed on, like with the mantra too. See, it's got the wisdom, it's got the devotion to the ideal, it's got the practice in it. Practice here, basically meditation and karma yoga. But in Vedanta, you've got the Jnanam, which is also hidden there, and you've got the Bhakti, which some people complain about is missing there. The non-emotion, what we call akshobha, not having reaction to things and being non-emotional. They've got that in spades there. But it's also there, obviously, because there's a Sanskrit word for it, in the Vedanta too. So we tend to be rising out of these sentimental flights of emotion that, well, you might as well call them just as bad as celebrating a spiritual experience, right? Isn't it pretty much the same thing? One makes you elated, the other makes you depressed. See, they're both not good for your practice. The purpose is to remain solid in your practice forever, until practice is you. We are, practice is us, you see, like the Avatut. So yeah, there'll come a place in your sadhana where practice just becomes realization, and you can't tell the two apart, like the Avatut singing about him. Those two are important. Training under one preceptor and transmission that you get from that one preceptor. Jisho Sojo Shin, inner perfection. Nice Japanese 3-word for that. Swarupa is what we would call it in Sanskrit. That is the essence of consciousness within. It's your Swarupa. Swarupa Pratishta. Pratishta means just to be steady all the time. You have to be constant in the knowledge that the ox is there. You can never lose it. It just sometimes gets obscured, and you have to deal with that. Well, here's a good one for everyone. Kan Shiketsu. It's attachment to the worlds. They call it, the people who are attached to the world, they call them dry shit sticks. Because that's what you used to wipe yourself with when you're walking around the world. Couldn't have leaves. Leaves might not be effective. Just pick up a stick and do some cleaning, you see. So they actually, in Zen, they laugh about this as ha-ha, kind of wry humor, you see. But that's people who are attached to the world. So what could we find that's like that? One deluded by the world of name and form, an agyani. They have no wisdom of higher things. And they're just, wasting toilet water, if you want to put it in the same vein. I missed one too, I'm said here, so I probably wanted to get to that one so bad, just for the effect. Oh yeah, the one I missed is actually very important. We were talking about it on the way over. Banpo no Joshiki, every man's consciousness. It sounds sort of like Mike, doesn't it? But that's not at all the way Zen means it. When you become enlightened, you become ordinary. That's the beautiful thing about Zen. You don't levitate or float around or become a sensation or cause miracles and things that, celebrate spiritual experiences, go about calling yourself this and that with an inflated ego. You just return to your natural state. That's who you are. And then you go have tea with your students. See, and they come and talk to you about their practice. I was reading a description yesterday about Lexington meeting Bernie Glassman, Roshi Bernie Glassman, who passed away I think 4 years ago now in New York. But in the first, Lex is describing his first meeting with Bernie Glassman after he got ordinated into the path by Maizumi Roshi. So they're there in New York, and Lex said, I immediately went to see him. And so they met, and their first conversation, he talks about their first conversation, how it was just, they talked about practice, and Lex said something like, "Oh, he's not the idea that most Westerners would have about being some Zen teacher. Just like an ordinary person, you see, and he'll just sit there and talk to you, and you don't have any sense that he's the teacher and you're the student." So this is a good thing, I'm saying, and this is a characteristic of Zen. We've noticed that there's no, putting yourself up in a pedestal kind of thing there. In fact, it's pretty much the opposite way. It's not like, the danger there would be the student stops respecting the teacher and thinks him to be ordinary. But if you have the teaching given, like back to Guru Parampara, then you do have inner reverence for the teacher, because the Guru in India is that person who has led you to God. So if you saw God and Guru in the same room, if that was important, you'd salute the Guru first for awakening you. It's like if you walked up to a soul, living soul like that, and said, "Oh, good to meet you. Good to meet your ox too." And you, "What ox?" "Oh, there it is." So, the Roshi is showing you that your ox never left you. He's like, you don't need to tie him to a noose. He's following you around all the time. But you couldn't see that because he was behind you. But you meet this ordinary person who just says, "Hello, it's good to meet you, and I really like your ox too." And all of a sudden you awake to the fact what your Buddha nature is. And you don't have to be a kanshiketsu. We won't go into that any deeper. There's Bussho, enlightenment with no traces. So I put these two together, because I could have 5 or 6 of these charts. I just was satisfied with showing you these comparisons, because I thought we've had enough of these kinds of problems, some of these kinds of problems in the path, Hindu path, you see, coming to America. It's not just the Hatha Yoga and all of that kind of taking the cloud away from the upper limbs, but it's a lot of other problems of misunderstanding about gurus, misunderstanding about teachings, and so these things that I chose in the Japanese language that I saw were so obvious to what America's going through, then I put that into the Sanskrit and showed how India dealt with them all this time. So enlightenment with no traces, that's called Sahaja Samadhi in Sanskrit. It's a natural state of enlightenment. And you probably would find the ordinary man's consciousness there in that person. Like Sixin used to tell us, Sri Ramakrishna was just a true human being. I think it's the words he used. A true human being. So everyone else has gotten away from their humanity. It's now manned unkind instead of mankind. But so you meet this person who's just a true human being and you're stunned. Well, all compassion, all love, all giving, no ego, wants the best for you. You're nonplussed by it. It's like, who is this person? Even Swamiji, as a young teenager, felt that way when he met him. Enlightenment with no traces, so I put there to remind me that, in parens, bird, because that's where Sri Ramakrishna got, or probably where Zen got, this teaching that the bird flies through the good God blog. The bird flies through the air without leaving a trace, see. So that's back to that no karma, right? That they move through the world and you're kind of looking for what they left behind. And if you find anything, it's like, wow, it's all teachings and it's all good for me. Sometimes I can't even see who they were because they didn't have an ego. See? So you're looking for something that isn't there. And that's their secret. Action in inaction, inaction in action. Samu is everyday work in the monastery. Of course, we would call that seva, right? Like you came to do today. You see, come early, serve the guru, the ashram, and the sangha. Akushu ku, misunderstanding of emptiness. That's one of the mayoi. That's one of the problems with, I'll show you that after the break. One of the problems with certain kinds of Zen practice that they don't authorize, the Roshis. And of course that's neti-neti for us. proper discrimination to find out the real nature of things, rather than misunderstanding the teaching. It's also a very powerful teaching that so many of us are guilty of in America since these great teachings of yoga and Vedanta and Zen too came to us. Zen much later on the scene. Heikan. Transcend distraction and gain concentration. That's pratyahara dharana in yoga. You have to get over the mind's distractions, and then if you do, there's a stage of Zen ox herding where now the ox likes to be with you again. Because you thought maybe you'd lost it. You saw it in the woods finally. You managed to get a tether around it. You have to pull it, and it's obstinate. You see, it's hard to get it back, right? We'll look at this later, and it'll make more sense to you because of this. But then there comes where the ox just gets the idea, and you don't even have to tether it anymore. It follows you. See, a beautiful, simple way that Zen puts it, and this describes it very well. It's just, if you want to put it simply, it's just, get rid of the distracted mind. What's the one word that I use so often, that we used at the seminar a couple weeks ago, and the 5 kinds of mind that we were looking at? The first one was called brooding. This is brooding, distraction. It's a waste of time. It's that rust. It's not only just the rust, it's how the rust accumulated on the needle. It's also going to give rise to more, like the rust of the watchman. He gets used just to being lazy at night, and there's an invading army out there, and that's calamity coming your way, and he falls asleep and doesn't alert them in time. That's what Buddha meant about war in this world, and not losing your vigil. You see, it's very, very, like Arjuna has lost his vigil. You see, so it's very, very important that this is a fine balance, and you have to keep it. And it's the most important thing. The best story Sri Ramakrishna told about that was the woman with the rice machine. She's got a baby. She's pumping the pedal. She's feeding rice into the slot. There's a big stone pestle going up and down because she's pumping. She's talking with the customer. Pay me what you owe me, he says. What's the most important thing? You ask people. Oh, the baby. Oh, you sentimental fools. You'll never be Zen Roshis. You'll never be Bodhisattvas. The most important thing is that she doesn't get her hand crushed by that pestle that's going up and down, because then she won't be able to make money to feed the baby, see? And the other deeper teaching about that up and down is what? She's doing it. She's going to catch her hand under the pestle that she's operating. So think about that in terms of who's causing your karma and so forth. So it goes very deep. A simple story can go very deep with it. So a little bit longer on this one, because distraction, just like, get thee behind me, Jesus said. And just get concentration, because that's the end of the game of Maya when you have concentration. Maya exists when you're distracted. It doesn't exist when you're focused. That's just the simplest way to put it. So be done with it. You're never in Maya. Maya is you, so be done with it. It's the secret of everything. Dharana. Then you can get samadhi, but people are trying to get samadhi through 30-hour meditation retreats and so forth when they haven't got a focused mind yet. There's still garbage in their mind when they go in the temple. One saw the Lord in the temple, the other saw a bunch of trash in his mind. It's pretty obvious what you need to do. And there are practices to do it. You must follow the tradition, I would say, because I think some of the more modern forms of Zen and so forth are losing that connection. And probably you could say the same for some of these charlatan kind of teachers that are coming over to the West from India. They're not focusing in on the tradition. The four qualifications of the teacher, Shankara says, look at that. That's not even that old. 1,300 years is not that old to look at a teaching like that. Tariki Jeriki, self-effort as contrasted to grace. Isn't it beautiful? That because we have this teaching so strong from Sri Ramakrishna. Sadhana, Sharanagata, self-effort and self-surrender, they're the same thing as grace. So again, with the pestle and the foot, bestow upon yourself your own grace. Don't wait for it to come from on high, or certainly from your ancestors or something. Have they ever given you anything worthwhile? What about the gurus? See, they've given you the path to freedom, and you haven't taken it yet. So where are your allegiances? Where do they lie? And why do they lie there? This is where studies like this are very important. I think they're so important that I'm giving you a language lesson, a spiritual language lesson here, where I would usually go to the meaning of words. But these meanings aren't that deep. These are just correlation meanings that shows you that 53 generations of India is now in Japan and has come to America, hands across the water style. We need to look at this and clarify our thinking about it, because thought is father to the deed, and word is somewhere in between there, you see. Zandan, destruction of the dualistic worldview. I love it in Zen, see. That's pretty much Advaita right there. Advaita Dhyan. Focus on reality, not relativity. And people are always focusing on relativity. Either they don't know what reality is, they don't believe in it, haven't ever heard of it, sort of like milk. See, people who never heard of it. Or they're not interested in it. There's 4 reasons for you right there. And then there's a 5th. Oh, it's too hard. Or a 6th. I'd rather have pleasure. I'd rather not practice, thank you. Or maybe even 7th. I'm going to pretend I'm enlightened, so I won't have to practice. Oh, my ox is gone. Too bad. Guess we'll go down to the tavern, see, tonight. Daishi Daigotettai, the great death. You've heard of it, right? In Zen, I think. They bring it up in the 3 pillars of Zen teaching. The great death. Also, I put in here just the great rebirth, too. So that would be to us ahamkara vinashana. It'd be like dying on your pillow in Zen. It would be like finally my ego got the idea and just got out of the way. And I became humble. I became a natural human being again. I became myself. And realized my ox loves me, and I love my ox. And you see, I might want to bring it forward, because it's always behind there, you see. Take a look at yourself. As we're coming to the end of our time with a couple minutes, we'll just get this language lesson out of the way, but it's there for your meditation. Even if you're not a Zen practitioner and you're just a Vedantist, just a Vedantist, what a statement. But you can see then how it will freshen your approach. That's a beautiful thing, you see, about doing something different. You don't have to abandon what your ideal is to do something different. You're complementing. And that's about, world traditions are like that. World religious traditions, like our bumper sticker we put out, no such thing as a foreign religion. All religion is indigenous to your soul. Yeah. As we know about that. See, so if you want one, write us. At this point, you could probably even get it free. I don't know. Or send us a $2 donation. Or $200 donation. All religion is indigenous to your soul, and there's only one God. Everyone says it. Nobody follows through about it. Except Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, that's his new dispensation. And then finally, penultimately, Fukatoku, the insubstantial nature of phenomena. Isn't that nice? Across there on the Advaita Vedanta side, well, we call it Maya. Less syllables. But Fukatoku is kind of good too, because it sounds like what you want to do to Maya. Fukadogo. So Maya is that inexplicable power of illusion and projection of mind. Again, we've already had enough words about it in this little session, about distraction and about you're never in Maya, as Vivekananda told us, to understand what we're saying here. Zembyo, that segues me into the next chart, which I'll put up soon, about these kinds of Zen sickness. So this is a fourth or fifth kind of Zen sickness. So, Zen is so beautiful that way. It'll give it to the culture in whatever generation it comes to China or Tibet, or when it comes to Japan, comes to America again, and then they just say, well, this is our practice. Oh, we call that one of our sicknesses. Most religions aren't going to admit that they have sicknesses, you see. Oh, this is the best, and this is the best ideal, and it's all great. Let's put everything back, sweep it under the carpet. Everything we've done in the name of religion, like popes going to war, Kanshiketsu, stuff like that. So basically, they're saying, yeah, this is a kind of Zen sickness you want to watch out for in our practice. So Zembyo is one of them, describing the feelings, emotions, sensations that arise. In other words, you don't do that to your Roshi. I saw a Swami walk by at a Vedanta center once, looked left, because there were two voices in there. I quickly looked away because it wasn't my business. But there was one of the Swamis I knew there, sitting there with a woman, and her back was to me and he was facing me. So I looked over there, and she was just complaining bitterly about her life. And the Swami's eyes left her for a split second and looked at me, and he went, I'll never forget that experience. Like, please, mother, take this woman away. You see, I'm here, I'm supposed to be helping her, but she just won't let me get a word in edgewise. So it's just like emotions and problems, and it's like people watching TV and the media nowadays. It's just obsessed with that. And they can't talk of anything after they shut the TV off, if they ever do. So this is Zen sickness to them. You don't partake of this. It's back to the distraction. The unreal has taken over the real, as Vedanta would say, and you're mistaking. It might be one thing to lose your ox, but maybe all of a sudden you've got a tiger there, you see, that you think is an ox, and you go up to hug that, like Sri Ramakrishna said, another good God block. The tiger's God too, but it doesn't mean you should go hug it, he said. So these are the kind of things that we'll look at later. Across the board there, we call that vasana samskara, rising of desires and mental impressions from karmic accrual of past lives. I mean, I have to use more words to describe that than they do. But that's basically what's happening. All this stuff is coming forward in this poor emotional person. And you want to help them, but they're not really giving you much chance to do that. But it is, if the ego is getting deflated by such things, they can insert some sort of needle in there, you see, and waken them up to their predicament at least. So that's the good side of it. Everything has both sides here. So here, let's pause. A pause that refreshes, I hope. Get some liquid and we'll have some prasad fruit here at the ashram. And we'll continue on with this first class in a 3-class series of Zen ox herding and lion taming.